I mean, there's certainly nothing that this committee could do with $600 million. I mean, hey.
Yep. What a joke.
All right, well, there it's 9:30. So let's see who we've got here. I feel like Al Pacino in the movie Heat. What do we got? Okay. Not sure if everyone gets that reference, but okay. So, welcome to.
There's a halo around Councillor Kavanaugh's head. I'm just wondering if that's on purpose.
Always.
Something we should know. Okay.
There's always a halo around.
Okay.
My
Okay.
head. You guys just didn't know.
There it is.
Not see your face.
No, I'm in a different room because there's a planned power outage because they're replacing hydro poles. So I came out to where the sun is shining. That's why. Instead of in the back.
All right. Well, welcome to Agenda 18 of the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management for this Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. So I will first ask our lovely committee coordinator, Christopher, to do roll call.
Happy to do so, Chair. Councillor Brockington.
Good morning.
Councillor Cloutier.
Isa.
Councillor Darouz.
Here.
Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor McKinney.
Here.
Vice Chair Mott Menard.
Here.
And Chair Moffat.
I am also here, as evidenced by the fact that I've already spoken. So thank you all for joining us today. We have a relatively short agenda. I expect that you all know how to use Zoom and whatnot, and the mutes and the raising hands and the hey. Yeah, okay, we're good. Perfect. So declarations of interest. Do any of you own Enbridge? If you do, that would be a declaration of interest. I'd also question why you were here.
Seriously, would it be though? If there was Enbridge stock?
Well, I think it would be I mean, it could be a debate.
Wonder.
We could have a debate. I mean, because if you voted against the motion and you owned Enbridge, one would say that you're doing it in your own best interest as the owner of Enbridge, right?
It could be in some mutual funds. I don't know, but anyway, let's carry on.
Yeah, well, you take the next half hour to look into that and then let me know. If it turns out you are an owner of Enbridge, just let me know by the end of the meeting. Okay, so item number 1 is 2020 drinking water quality management. Oh, I actually just skipped over the whole minutes thing. I got lost. I got off track. I apologize. Confirmation of minutes for the meeting of Tuesday, June 29th, 2021. Are those minutes carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you so much. All right, back to that whole number 1 thing. So our drinking water quality management system report. So we don't have any speakers on it. Does anyone have any questions about how wickedly awesome our water is?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can we ask a quick question for staff concerning the drinking water? I always ask an update about the Shadow Ridge 2, and if it's the time, can we ask a question now or later?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and ask that right now. I don't see any other questions, so we can just get that one taken away.
I know I see Marlon on the call, or somebody from her team can give me a quick update on the Shadow Ridge 2 project, how it's moving forward. So, thanks.
Yes, Councillor. So work is ongoing with Shadow Ridge. The nitrate levels have stabilized in that system, and as a matter of fact, we're seeing a decline in the nitrate levels. So all is improving in that area right now.
Thank you. And where are we with the construction of the wells and the construction of the second well?
I'll turn it over to Ian and Ian Douglas, and he'll give you more information. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, Councillor. There were test wells that were drilled and evaluated during 2021, and I believe they now have a contractor to do the final design of the production wells, and they'll be moving into construction phase, I expect, this winter. And then there's a number of, tests that have to be done and so on. So construction will take place, I think, largely during 2022. And there's also a fair bit of modeling and permitting that has to be done to make sure that these wells don't impact other wells and to look at the hydraulics underground. That's part of the water protection, source protection work that has to be done. So I'm not that close to the project, but I would expect to see commissioning in probably 2023. As Marilyn mentioned, the nitrate levels have stabilized, so that's a good thing. And the water quality for the test wells at least looks to be quite good. There's a few small components that are there that we'll have to be mindful of. There's a little bit of iron, nothing of health concern, a little bit of ammonia. So a couple operational challenges, but there's no nitrates in the lower water, and it'll be a much more secure source for the future. So that's the update I can provide.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to tie the committee time, but I will ask if Ian and his team, maybe we can meet off. We can move this conversation to offline. And I really am looking for some quick update concerning the construction and the whole, the full project landscape. So if that we can do that, that will be appreciated.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. So just on that, I know it's a quirky one because I mean, as committee members know, yes, we have the two primary drinking water distribution systems in the city, Britannia and Lemieux Island, but we also have a number of these communal well systems, one in Carp, two in Richmond, one in Munster, this one in Shadow Ridge and Greeley. The one in Greeley it's been a bit of a challenge, but the nitrates, which can be caused by sort of a higher concentration of septic systems in an area. It can also occur naturally, as we've seen elsewhere in the city as well, up in the Kinburn area. But here, just remind me, what's the high level that the province allows? I know we obviously want to be as low as possible. This isn't as low as possible, but what's the high level and where are we at here?
Yes, Chair. For nitrate, both Health Canada and the province of Ontario have a standard of 10 milligrams per liter as the maximum acceptable concentration. And the levels at Shadow Ridge got as high as about 4.5, and they're now stabilized at around 3. So it's well within the 10, but we don't see nitrate in any of our other well systems.
Yeah.
So it's an anomaly, and I think it speaks to the fact that there are some vulnerabilities in the current aquifer. So going lower is long-term protection for the residents. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So the city's been working with the I believe the original developer of that property to address that and get better quality drinking water for the residents in that community. So thank you, Councillor Drews. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Marilyn. So on that report that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend that Council receive the 2020 Management Review Report of the Drinking Water Quality Management System.
Received.
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 Very much. Teresa's cat was also like, yeah, that's received. Item number 2, status update, Standing Committee on Environmental Protection and Water Waste Management, inquiries and motions for the period ending 10th of September 2021. Can we receive that item? Received.
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 And our final item, which was a motion that was provided at the previous meeting in June of this committee from Councillor Menard. It's a motion to request the Government of Ontario to develop and implement a plan to phase out gas-fired electricity generation and call for consideration of alternative sources of energy. So we have speakers on this item. And I do know staff are also here to speak to it because I know staff worked with the counselor on the development of the motion. The motion is in line with what we've previously approved in terms of reaching our targets and our goals within the Climate Change Master Plan, Energy Evolution. So I'll just ask Councillor Menard briefly to intro the report, the motion in front of us, and then we will go to our delegations on the matter.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Chair. The motion speaks to the City of Ottawa's request for the Government of Ontario to develop and implement a plan to phase out gas-fired electricity generation by 2030 to help the City of Ottawa, the province, and the Government of Canada meet their climate targets. We've had 31 other municipalities in Ontario pass similar or the exact same motion. And we're the last major urban center in Ontario that's considering this at this time. The motion also calls for the IESO, which is currently considering this in a report to be produced to give consideration to wind, solar, demand response, and Quebec hydro, as well as conservation. So the timing is good. I look forward to the discussion. We have some good delegations here that will also have expertise and can go through it. I've got a lot of background information. People have questions, and yeah, just looking forward to our discussion. There is also, I should mention, Chair, an amendment that staff have asked to bring forward as well. That should be distributed to committee, and so when that's distributed, I'm happy to read that out whenever you'd like.
Yeah, Chris, has that been sent out?
We're working on that as we speak, Councillor.
No worries. Yeah, so what's in front of us just before we go to delegations, just so committee is aware, what's being asked specifically is that the city request the Government of Ontario develop and implement a plan to phase out gas-fired electricity generation by 2030 to help the City of Ottawa, the Province of Ontario, and the Government of Canada meet climate targets that the City of Ottawa call on the IESO, Independent Electricity System Operator, to give full consideration to wind and solar, demand response, Quebec hydro, conservation, and other models. And 3, that the resolution be sent to a bunch of people. And then there's that be it further resolved, which is coming, and it's from our staff. And just give you a sense of what that is about. Sorry, as I move around my multiple screens. So we'll introduce properly,
Sure.
but just to give you a sense here, it's
We'll
it's
introduce that momentarily.
yeah, its additional piece just is lift the prohibition of third-party ownership on net metering assets and develop a framework for virtual net metering, allow distributed energy resources to participate in. Anyways, there's a number of stuff here, so I'll let it get properly formalized. But it's just about giving more opportunity locally to provide alternatives to power generation. And again, it's all aligned with what we're looking for in our energy evolution. But when that's finally ready, I will get Councillor Menard to introduce that. So we have the full motion, the full report in front of us. We do have, so as I mentioned, we do have delegations on this, and we did receive correspondence as well. Actually, a number of about 8 submissions previously to committee, and some are in support, some have concerns, and I can discuss that. I can touch on some of those when we wrap up with the delegation. So first off, we will go to Dr. Marianne Aragonello with For Our Kids Ottawa Gatineau. It would be Aragonello.
Hello, Dr. Marianne Aragonello.
Oh.
So I am a scientist, an educator, and a parent. And today I am speaking on behalf of For Our Kids Ottawa Gatineau in my garden because my kids are at home because we have a COVID test waiting for us. So if I get distracted, I apologize. We represent a group of almost 600 parents who are concerned about the health of our planet and the future of our kids, of our children, the future the children will inherit. We are worried about climate change and the speed at which human actions are causing our planet to warm. Our children are also worried. A recent study showed that 75% of children as young as 5 years old, so the age of my children, also have climate anxiety. That climate anxiety comes not only from the worry that they have little ability to affect change, but also that the adults who do have that power are not making the changes that we need fast enough. As parents, we try to do everything in our power to protect our children from harm. But when it comes to climate change, we know that our own individual actions are not enough. We need systemic changes to reach the IPCC goal of 1.5 degrees of warming, or as close to 1.5 degrees as now as possible. This is why this motion is so important to us. As a councillor for the City of Ottawa, you can impact change at a level that will be significant to lower our emissions and slow down the rate of warming. We know that the Ontario government has not made climate change a priority, and indeed, with its proposed plan to open up more gas-powered power plants, it will be locking in Ontario into carbon infrastructure that, as the world transitions to clean energy, it will likely be retired early, even before it has reached its expected lifespan. This is a significant loss of billions of dollars due to lost potential. As well, a recent study has shown that the world's remaining carbon budget, the amount we can emit and still keep the world at 1.5 degrees of warming, will already be fully used up by the existing fossil fueled infrastructure that already exists. The planet can literally no longer afford to build more fossil fuel infrastructure. We can no longer afford to make decisions that are not in line with the eventual phasing out of fossil fuels. As you are aware, advancing zero emission generation of electricity at the provincial level, as Councillor Moffat stated, is already a priority project for the Ottawa Energy Evolution Strategy, one that was unanimously passed by all of City councillors. But we do not have time to wait the full 5 years for this project to be completed. Today is a day to show that the Energy Evolution Strategy is not just words on paper, but that we will stand behind those projects and begin acting on them. The Independent Energy Supply Operator, IESO, recently hosted a workshop about transitioning away from fossil fuels. They effectively stated that they will only begin seriously planning for a gas phase out if ordered to do so by the Ontario government. So we as individuals, no matter how concerned or how loud we can be, we will not have the power to influence the change in government policy needed by ourselves. We need you as our elected officials to use your power and combine it with the power of the 30+ municipalities that already endorsed this phase out. So please, I ask on behalf of parents across Ontario and Ottawa, please pass this motion. Let the Ontario government know that to protect our climate, to protect our air, to ensure that the most marginalized in our province have access to clean, renewable electricity, we need to transition now so that it can be completed by 2030. Our children and the future generations are counting on you to act now and protect their planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to come here today. Any questions for our delegation here today? I do not see any, so thank you, Marianne. Appreciate your time, and hopefully your COVID test that you're waiting for comes back negative.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Jack Gibbons, who is the chair of the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Hello, Mr. Gibbons. You have 5 minutes. Well, we'll start the time when you unmute yourself.
Still muted, Mr. Gibbons.
Councillor Moffat and
There you
members
go.
of the committee. I'm Jack Gibbons from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you this morning about the need to phase out our gas-fired power plants. The Ontario Clean Air Alliance was established in 1997 to promote the phase out of our 5 dirty coal-fired power plants. And we worked on that issue for 17 years until the last coal plant was phased out in 2014. And now we're working on the next step to clean up our electricity grid, namely to move to a 100% carbon-free electricity system for Ontario by phasing out our gas-fired power plants. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows the historic and forecast greenhouse gas pollution from our electric power plants, and it goes from 2005 to 2040. The good news is that thanks to the coal phase-out, the greenhouse gas pollution from our power plants fell by 93% between 2005 and 2017. But since 2017, the pollution from our power plants has started to rise again. And according to the IESO, the pollution from our gas plants will increase by more than 300% by 2030 and by 500% or more by 2040. And if that occurs, we will lose about 40% of the pollution reduction benefits that we achieved by phasing out dirty coal. Next slide, please. Now, there are three major reasons why the IESO is forecasting a big jump in pollution. The first is that they're forecasting that our demand for electricity will increase by about 1% a year. The second reason is that they're forecasting that the Pickering nuclear station will close in 2025. And the third reason is that the government of Ontario is planning to meet virtually all of our need for new electricity supply by simply importing more fracked gas from Western Canada and Pennsylvania and ramping up the output of our gas-fired power plants. Next slide, please. Now, as you know, Ontario has a climate target. It's to reduce our greenhouse gas pollution by 30% by 2030. But according to the Auditor General, we're not on track to achieving that target. But here's the good news. By phasing out the gas-fired power plants, that would give Ontario all or virtually all of the extra pollution reductions it needs to achieve its 2030 climate target. And that's why we're calling for a gas plant phase out, because it's the easiest and lowest cost option for Ontario to achieve its 2030 climate target. Next slide, please. Now we're proposing a three-prong strategy to phase out the gas plants. The first prong is energy efficiency. The second prong is to import more low-cost water power from Quebec. And the third prong is to start reinvesting in wind and solar energy again. Now, we all know that wind and solar used to be very high-cost sources of electricity supply. But thanks to huge technological progress, wind and solar are now our lowest cost sources of new electricity supply. Next slide, please. In addition, by investing in energy efficiency in wind and solar, we can create jobs in every single community in Ontario. On the other hand, if we meet our need for new supply by simply importing more fracked gas from Western Canada and Pennsylvania, that will create zero new jobs in Ontario. Now, we all know that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. And that's why Ontario is so lucky to be located next door to the province of Quebec, because Quebec's huge hydroelectric reservoirs—
1 minute, Mr. Gibbons.
Pardon me?
1 minute.
Quebec's huge hydroelectric reservoirs can act like a giant battery for our wind and solar energy. That is, by integrating our wind and solar with Quebec's hydroelectric reservoirs, we can turn wind and solar into a firm 24/7 source of baseload electricity for Ontario. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. We have a question from a couple councillors. We'll start with Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Mr. Gibbons, thank you for your presentation. I do wonder if you can respond to some of the concerns that we have heard and provide more detail. We have heard from some manufacturers of gas that right now and for the foreseeable future, electricity cannot be efficiently stored, and that emerging storage technologies are more expensive and can provide energy for only a set amount of time. And so I'm wondering if you can respond to that concern that's been highlighted by gas producers.
Well, yes, that's true. At the moment, battery storage is imperfect, but that's again why we are so lucky to be located next door to Quebec, because Quebec's hydroelectric reservoirs can also act like a battery. Those reservoirs are huge and they're already built, and they can provide that battery service. Now, people who are located in California don't have access to Quebec's reservoirs, but Ontario does. And there's a study by the MIT, by researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that have discovered that Quebec's hydroelectric reservoirs are the lowest cost storage option for wind and solar. So we are very lucky to be located next door to Quebec, and Hydro-Quebec does want to be the battery for northeastern North America. And also, there's another great storage option coming along. As you know, by 2030, we're going to have a lot of electric vehicles. And electric vehicles are parked for 95% of the hours of the day. And when they're parked, their batteries can be storage devices for the power grid. And they can be charged up when we have surplus wind and solar. And then at times of high demand, when we need to phase out the gas plants, these electric vehicles' batteries have the potential to provide power back to the grid. And people are forecasting by 2030, the storage capacity of our electric vehicles' batteries will be more than double the capacity of our gas-fired power plants. So we definitely, we can phase out the gas plants by 2030.
Thanks for that. I have some other follow-ups. Do we currently have transmission links between Quebec and Ontario?
Yes, absolutely. We do. We have 7 transmission links right now, including links in the city of Ottawa. And with those existing links, we are importing power. Last year, we got about 3% of our electricity from Hydro-Quebec. But even with the existing transmission links, we have the potential to triple our imports from Hydro-Quebec tomorrow if we wish to do so. But in addition, we should be building a new transmission link so we can import even more low-cost water power from Quebec.
Okay, thank you for that. My last question is just around that import from Quebec of electricity. There's been a discussion that Quebec's total generation capacity falls short of Ontario's peak gas demands. Even if we imported 100% of Quebec's power, we'd not meet our peak needs. And I guess the peak needs are, the spikes that happen in the summer when high AC use, and in the winter when it's very, very cold. So can you just go through that comment from gas producers and what solutions may exist there?
Well, yes. Quebec has a winter peaking system. We have a summer peaking system. Our peak demand occurs in the summer. And at the summer, Quebec has a huge surplus of capacity, over 10,000 megawatts, which is more than our demand for our gas-fired power plants. And so Quebec definitely can help us phase out our gas plants on peak days. But we're not just recommending that we use Quebec power. We should also be investing in energy efficiency and demand response to reduce our peak day demands. And we should be building new wind and solar in Ontario.
Thank you very much for that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Buckington.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, Mr. Gibbons. Thanks for your presentation. It seems to me this motion is maybe 5 years too late, and let me explain what I mean by that. The provincial government is paranoid about providing a constant power source to the people of Ontario. They do not want electricity to be interrupted. They see growing demand, and with Pickering coming offline, they want consistent energy source for the people. So why did they choose gas-powered plants, investing in gas-powered plants? Obviously, there are multiple options that you've just enumerated, but why did they go that route when there are cleaner sources, when there are other sources? What's the background here that we're not talking about this morning?
Well, you'd have to ask our Premier Ford that.
They've already made their investment. They've already made their decision in what they're going to. And we're going to pass a motion today that says, despite you investing in new gas-powered plants, we want you to go in a different direction. So we could pass this motion and look good to the people of Ottawa today, but what is the realistic chance that we're actually going to impact change here? The provincial government has already invested. They've said, if we're taking nuclear offline, part of our nuclear plants offline, we're going to gas-powered plants. So the city of Ottawa can say, no, we don't want that. GHG lowering as our targets. We want to meet these targets by 2030, but we need to provide them with a roadmap. Here are the alternatives. And I think your report was pretty good in making sure we're aware of the other options. But to me, it sounds like the provincial government has already made their decision. That's why the timing of this motion seems odd to me.
Well, sir, with respect to the gas plants, Premier McGuinty was elected in 2003 on a promise to phase out the dirty coal-fired power plants. Part of his strategy was building gas plants. He signed 20-year contracts for the gas plants. And the good news is by 2030, about 80% of that contract capacity will have expired. So this is just the right time to start moving away and thinking about a new cleaner sources of power. And yes, Pickering is forecast to close in 2025, but it's important, and it's a large source of power, but it's also important to realize that at the moment, it produces more power than we need, and about half of its output is exported to the United States. And so the good news is that at the moment we only get about 6% of our electricity from the fossil power plants, and so we're now in 2021. We've got 9 years. We can definitely ramp up energy efficiency very, very dramatically in 9 years. There's a huge untapped potential. We can ramp up wind and solar very quickly. We can also help phase out the gas plants by simply stopping exporting gas-fired electricity to the US. In 2019, 35% of our gas production was exported. And we can import more power from Quebec with the existing transmission lines. So we do have options. We can do it. I mean, when Dalton McGuinty was elected Premier of Ontario in 2003, dirty coal provided us with 25% of our electricity. But Dalton McGuinty phased out all of those coal plants in 11 years, despite the fact that they provided us with 25% of our power when he was elected. Now fossil gas is only 6%. We can definitely phase that out by 2030 if there's the political will.
Yeah, on average, the use in 2020, I think from the Ontario Energy Board says 6.3%, but that can fluctuate, right? There are some days where reliance on gas powered electricity is above 20%. I agree with you. It can be done and it should be done, and it should be done with reasonable timelines attached to it. You mentioned Quebec. Is Manitoba a realistic source for Ontario as well, or does our population just too far away, a large population is too far away from Manitoba?
Well, no, Manitoba is also a good source of low-cost clean water power, and it's certainly a good option for Northwestern Ontario. And the IESO does have an emergency power agreement with Manitoba right now to provide us with renewable power if we need it to keep our lights on in Northwestern Ontario. But the vast majority of Ontario's power and gas plants are located in Southern Ontario, and to phase them out, the Hydro-Quebec option is the one that can provide us the biggest benefit.
For sure. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Mr. Gibbons, just a quick question for me on this. You know, in Ontario, and really anywhere, we sadly we often end up with an urban-rural, divide to a degree. Like we saw it last night. This happens. It's a reality. From a municipal perspective, rural communities end up with landfills, pits and quarries, and wind turbines that serve the needs of urban dense communities that will never host these things. We've heard since the creation of the Green Energy Act in 2003, we've heard concerns from rural municipalities across Ontario about hosting large-scale industrial wind turbines in their communities. They have no say. They still to this day have no say. The province has canceled the ability to apply, but that's just temporary because I don't see them putting in anything in place, oddly enough, to actually address that concern, aside from just canceling it for the time being and just waiting for another government to come in and probably change that policy. So what's the Clean Air Alliance's position on municipal approval, buy-in from when it comes to locating wind turbines in their communities?
Well, Councillor Moffat, you make a very good point, and we agree with you. In terms of wind turbines, they should only be built in a local community if that local municipal council supports it. And there will be some communities that will say no to wind turbines, and that's fine, because there will also be many communities that will say yes, because they want to get the jobs and the economic development. And also the good news is there's a huge potential for building wind turbines in the Great Lakes, where there won't be the aesthetic concern that there is in certain rural communities in Ontario. According to a study that was done for the Government of Ontario, wind turbines located in our Great Lakes could provide us with over 80% of our electricity needs. So yes, absolutely, it was a mistake to remove the municipal veto on new power plants, and so it should be restored. If a municipality doesn't want wind turbines, they shouldn't be built in that community.
I appreciate that position. Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Gibbons? Seeing none, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We move on now to the Clean Air Partnership. Gabriela Kalapos, Executive Director.
Unmute. Hi there, everybody. Good morning. And thank you for the opportunity to allow me the time to speak to you about this motion and resolution and the importance of it. My name is Gabriela Kalapos. I'm from the Clean Air Partnership, and we're a charitable environmental organization dedicated to supporting municipalities and their partners to implement actions that foster low carbon resilient communities. Firstly, one of the reasons why this decarbonization of the Ontario's electricity system is so important is greenhouse gas emissions, of course. The targets that have been set by the City of Ottawa as part of the Climate Emergency Declaration, as well as part of the Energy Evolution Plan, are extremely dependent on achieving a fossil fuel-free electricity grid. I might also add that the province of Ontario's 2030 GHG greenhouse gas reduction target is also extremely dependent on achieving a fossil fuel-free electricity grid. as are the over 600 Ontario municipalities that have passed climate emergency declarations and the 30 that have passed the resolutions calling for the phase out of fossil fuels in the electricity system. One of the things that's most important about Ottawa's energy evolution is that it has an extremely strong focus on ensuring that Ottawa is proactively planning for where the energy transition is headed. The plan is geared towards helping Ottawa move away from energy systems moving towards the energy systems of the future, rather than doubling down on the energy system of the past and present. And if I can be cliche and quote Wayne Gretzky, as he said, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it has been. Our energy system needs to be low carbon, be less wasteful, and will require a doubling down and a tripling down on efficiency. It'll need to provide people more options for how they meet their energy needs. And it will also be the case that while it's also the case that we want to use as much of our existing assets as we possibly can, but if we don't plan for where the energy system of the world is going, we're going to be doing Ontario a disservice. I, for one, want Ontario to be a participant in this emerging energy transition. And I don't want us to simply be consumers of another jurisdiction's low carbon economy. But that will only happen when we proactively plan collectively for that to happen. Municipal councils understand the importance of a decarbonized electricity system to their GHG reduction targets, but they're also beginning to recognize the connection it has with local economic development. Keep in mind that almost all the money we spend on fossil fuel leaves our province and heads to the US or out west, whereas most of the money that we spend on efficiency and distributed energy resources will only stay within our local economies. Well, will stay within our local economies far more than fossil fuels expenditures do. You might be asking yourself why you would pass this resolution prior to the release of the IESO study that is being undertaken. And I say the reason for that is because the IESO study is taking place because of the resolutions that have been passed by over 30 other Ontario municipal councils. In addition, I want to reiterate that the IESO study is just the start of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. And if there's one thing I've learned in 12 or 25 years in this environmental sector, it is that putting action into play is rarely as easy as some people say, and it is rarely as difficult as other people say. But more than anything, it requires collective, committed planning. And we need to do that committed planning. We need to require a concerted, collective effort across the silos that in many ways have plagued Ontario energy planning thus far. It is the passing of resolutions. Oh, I'll be finished yet. I'm just wrapping up now. It is by the passing of resolutions such as the one you are considering that builds the critical mass for Ontarians moving forward to break down these silos that is holding us back and do right by future generations of Ontarians to ensure that we plan for the emerging low carbon transformation coming our way. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. We do have a question, Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much,
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I forgot to turn my camera on. Sorry about that.
It sounded great.
Nice to see you, Gabriella. Thanks for being here. I just wanted to ask quickly about the job differential between the gas plants versus other generated electricity. I'm not sure if you have knowledge of this, but I'm wondering if you can provide information on that aspect.
There have been a number of studies that have compared how much like $1 million investment in a big generation fossil fuel versus energy efficiency. There's no doubt about it. Energy efficiency from a local economic development is much more supportive of local economic development because it requires more labor to undertake the energy efficiency measures than just big generation or pipelines would actually result in. In addition, those jobs are not necessarily only temporary. They last for a longer term, and they also provide more economic development in the sense that it's people from the local community who are doing the work, because these jobs can't be outsourced. You need to have local players in the market undertaking those energy efficiency measures, as does the distributed energy. So usually the kind of studies have found that there's nothing better for local economic development than energy efficiency. That's the one that we want to advance as much as we possibly can. Then there's the distributed energy resource and the installations that take place on that one, and fostering that economy that provides the next best benefit for local economic development. The old energy system of the past, which is the big generation, big transmission lines with electrons just going one way from the plant to the consumer, those do have economic developments during the time of construction, but their economic developments are rather short-lived in comparison to energy efficiency and distributed energy resources. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. It's very helpful. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Chair. Chair, when you want, I can read in that other motion as well, just the amendment, whenever you'd like. If there's not more questions, I could do it now or at the end of the delegations.
Yeah, go ahead. If you have it ready now, go ahead now.
Okay.
If Chris can put it up on the screen.
That'd be great. Sorry for not the warning, Chris, but so it's that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management approve that the motion and associated recommendations in the report be amended to add the following. And whereas encouraging the deployment of distributed energy resources will help to enable a gas generation phase out, the following are actions which could be undertaken by the province, the IESO, and the Ontario Energy Board to aid with the deployment of DERs. Be it further resolved that Council requests the province of Ontario to A, lift the prohibition of third-party ownership of net metering assets and develop a framework for virtual net metering. B, allow new DER resources to participate in capacity auctions and fully and appropriately credit all DERs for their contributions to system capacity and bulk energy resources. And C, as local electricity distributors are rated through electrical utility scorecards, make DER market penetration and evaluation criterion, and permit local distributors to align local electricity distribution rate structures and rules to enhance DER market penetration. I can speak to this after the delegations if you'd like, Chair. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So that's in addition to, that's just, again, that was generated from staff working through Councilor Menard, and is in addition to what's already before us today. Thank you. And thank you, Gabriella. It gets just to thank you before we punted you back to the viewing room. So we did have originally Liz Bernstein was to speak with cafes. You're all familiar with Liz. She's often here. Jennifer Humphreys with cafes, as well as Andrew Keller-Herzog often speak here. We do have comments from Liz, which you have received. So you can review those, obviously, unsurprisingly, in support of the motion. So we move on to Oliver Waddington. Following Oliver will be Rob Barnes. I have to step away from the screen for 2 seconds. So Councilor Menard, if Oliver's done, we move to Rob Barnes if I'm not back. Thank you. Go ahead, Oliver. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Oliver Waddington. I'm a grade 12 student, and today I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Old Ottawa South Community Association. If you had gone for a walk in the afternoon back in July, you might have noticed that something didn't seem quite right. Despite it being midday, it looked like as if it was the early evening. This was the result of thick plumes of smoke that traveled here from a wildfire complex in northwestern Ontario. Now, wildfires happen in Ontario every year. However, the size and ferocity of these fires was unprecedented. And climatologists say that events like these are only going to become more and more common if we don't take immediate actions to reduce our greenhouse gas outputs. The devastating tornado outbreak in September of 2018 that caused extensive damage to Councillor El Shantiri and Councillor Egley's wards was in part caused by a multi-day heat wave that scientists and climatologists say will be much more commonplace in the future if immediate action is not taken in reducing the effects of human-caused climate change. But it doesn't have to be this way. As the second largest city in the province and one of the greenest cities in the country, we should be leaders and champions of this initiative and similar initiatives, not those who just stand by and watch from the sidelines as fossil fuel companies exploit our planet's resources and destroy our environment. We have a responsibility to not only my generation, but all future generations to come to protect this planet because it's the only one we have. So this is why I implore you to pass Councillor Menard's motion so that we can help protect and improve this beautiful city, country, and planet that we have. Thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Oliver. I was just standing over there, so I did hear everything you said. But I appreciate being here today, and thank you for taking that time. Are you missing class, or did you just have time?
I was missing class this morning, yes.
That's okay. It's laudable, and I'll allow it. And if you need an email, support for why you're missing class, I will gladly send you one to your teacher. Any questions for Mr. Waddington? Seeing none, I thank you for your time again today. I really do appreciate that. We will move on now to Rob Barnes with Ecology Ottawa. That's me.
Good morning. Apologies for that. I was having so much fun following everyone that I didn't realize that I wasn't in the call. Good morning, committee. My name is Rob Barnes. I'm speaking on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. Really pleased to have this opportunity this morning to discuss this motion. I think it's a really important motion, and I'll try to make three arguments in favor. I think fundamentally what this motion is about is standing up for the progress the city has already made on climate action. If you think about energy evolution, which this council passed unanimously, a lot of hard work went into that plan, and it's an elaborate plan to reduce emissions. But despite all the pages, 100 or so pages, any good plan boils down to two things: electrify everything and then decarbonize the grid. So today's motion, the gas plant phase-out motion, is really all about grid decarbonization. And it's also about making good on the investments Ottawa has made to date. Think about what we're doing as a city. Energy evolution calls for mass electrification of vehicles, and I know the city is moving forward with federal funding to electrify OC Transpo. We're talking about massive investments in retrofit improvements like heat pumps, replacement of old building stock, policy improvements in the new official plan aimed at high efficiency and electric powered buildings, and community energy strategies, among many other initiatives. All these things take time, effort, and energy. And if our electricity supply is dirty or is moving basically in the wrong direction, it really puts us, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back for the city. And we really can't afford to have that backward motion at this important time. Also look how far we've come historically, and I'll just go back maybe 10 years. We already heard discussion about the coal phase out. That phase out was accountable for a massive reduction in Ontario's greenhouse gas emissions. And if you look at the trend lines that are available in the various climate change master plans, you'll see that it had a serious effect on Ottawa's electricity emissions, right? Provincial policy really matters, and you want to be moving as much as possible in lockstep with strong provincial policy in this area. We heard from Jack that if the province proceeds with plans to ramp up greenhouse gas pollution from coal or from gas-fired plants, Ontario will lose roughly 40% of the pollution reduction benefits it has achieved through the coal phase out. So that's a stark move backwards at a time that we can't afford it. Also this is important just in terms of the pure numbers, and you'll see this in the staff report as well. Energy Evolution projects that around 8% of the 100% reductions that we need to do as a city by 2050 need to come or will be coming from the electricity sector. So the electricity sector and the cleanness of the grid really matters to the success of energy evolution and to our success as a city in, basically going forward with that climate emergency declaration from 2019 and numerous other measures, including many in the new official plan that council is entertaining, discussing, debating, etc. And I'll just quote from Energy Evolution on page 44 of the document is written: eliminating electricity generated from fossil fuel in Ontario's electrical supply will be a long-term activity, and provincial commitments in this area could partially replace the need to install capacity in the community. Now, we heard from Gabriela Calapos that installing capacity in the community can be a job generator, but we also heard, talk about, the challenges sometimes, with change in communities, wind farms, et cetera. So there's a question of really, how much additional capacity are we going to build, and how much more will we have to build to offset some of this energy that is dirty if the electricity grid is dirty. So that's the first point, is really, you know, let's double down on the work that we've done to date. The second is that we're really asking Ottawa to join many other cities from across the province. You know, and we heard this from Jack earlier, currently 31 municipalities representing more than 50% of Ontario's population have passed resolutions asking the government of Ontario to phase out gas plants. And just to list, you know, I won't go through the whole list because it'll bore you and take up all my time. But, you know, these are major cities: Toronto, St. Catharines, Oakville, Guelph, Kitchener, Hamilton. You know, let's not be the odd ones out. Let's not, you know, be the kind of the odd duck in the family of Ontario municipalities for some reason not calling for this. Finally, in the few seconds that remain, I just want to say that we're asking for something that's realistic. You know, if you look at what's happening in the US right now, President Biden has promised to create 100% carbon-free electricity grid for the US by 2035. Highly ambitious, especially because US currently gets 60% of its electricity from fossil fuels. In Ontario, we're only talking about 6% of provincial electricity from fossil gas. So phasing out our gas plants by 2030 would seem to be a reasonable target. Thank you very much for your time, and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Rob. I have a question here from Riley Rockington.
Good morning, Mr. Barnes. Thank you for your presentation. I do appreciate Ecology Ottawa's input on this and many items. Let me just share with you my concern. I agree 6.3% when you look at how we phased away from coal and into other sources. This seems realistic, and I agree. My concern is I don't know how much, when we close down some of the aged nuclear facilities, I don't know how much of the total pie that's going to take out of the system. And I don't know whether what is going to come out of the system can easily be replaced by non-renewable or clean sources. That's the concern I have. I want to maintain electricity in this province. I don't want it to be dirty. I don't want our GHGs to go up. I just want to make sure we've got a plan that we can hit. And I agree that municipalities need to encourage and pressure the provincial government to go this route. I agree with the motion, the sentiments of the motion. But do you have any sense what proportion of the total, when these plants come offline, they represent in Ontario?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That's a great question, and you know, maybe it's a $64,000 question, right? What are we going to replace it with? I don't have an immediate answer there. At Ecology Ottawa, we haven't, you know, done detailed studies of the provincial energy grid and where Ottawa would sit. That said, you know, some of the folks who were on the call earlier today, Ontario Clean Air Alliance and Clean Air Partnership, have done a lot of good work and have deep expertise on this file. So I think it would be productive to continue those conversations. Obviously, I saw some of the conversations earlier this morning, but I think they provide some insight in terms of the policy options available for municipalities as we navigate this challenging time of transition.
Yeah, I'd like to see the motion go one step further, and that says that if we think the most simplistic substitution for our natural gas powered sources is, let's just say, electricity from Quebec, and I'm just pulling that. That to me seems like one that if the Quebec government wants to dance, let's dance. Then we actually say that in the motion. Not only do we want provincial government to get rid of our gas-powered electrical plants, we believe that here are maybe three options, up to three options where we want to see. Maybe we want to invest more in wind and solar, but certainly partnerships with Quebec and Manitoba, I think, need to be further enhanced. And I think the motion should say, and here's where we think you should focus on. I just think that would be helpful. But anyway, thank you for your presentation. I always appreciate Ecology Ottawa's input. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Brockington. I don't see any more questions. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks.
We move now to Keith Brooks, who's the Program Director for Environmental Defense.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to address you. As you just said, I'm Keith Brooks. I'm the Programs Director with Environmental Defense Canada. We're a Canadian environmental charity, offices in Toronto and in Ottawa. We work on a range of environmental issues, climate change and energy is our largest file. And in fact, we have a long history of engaging on electricity and climate issues in Ontario. And I'm here to say that Environmental Defence supports the motion to call for the provincial government to phase out natural gas-fired power by 2030 and embrace clean energy sources like wind and solar and battery power, demand response, energy conservation, and efficiency. I think it's already been said this morning, but Ontario was once a climate leader in Canada, and that was mainly thanks to the phase out of coal-fired generation. And that's something that now Canada is following suit on across the country, really, right? And Canada now is working with other countries around the world to try to get them to phase out coal. And it's very disheartening to see that this progress that we've made in Ontario on electricity system is being squandered, and we're moving backward, in fact. And I'd say the provincial government has, quite frankly, all but turned its back on climate action right now. And as a result of an ideological distaste for green energy, it has a de facto plan to use natural gas to meet power as Pickering comes down and the other nuclear plants go through refurbishment. And if the plan was just a short-term plan to use gas as a bridge while refurbishment's happening, that's one thing, but that's not the plan. And I should say plan is kind of set in quotation marks. There's not really a plan right now in Ontario. In fact, the government got rid of the requirement to have a long-term energy plan. And so what we have is a hands-off approach to the electricity system that would leave us reliant upon more gas-fired power in the future because we're not building anything else. We're not contracting anything else. Nobody's been directed to do anything other than just lean on those old gas plants. But we have an opportunity to get off those plants. As Mr. Gibbons said, the contracts can expire around 2030. This is the opportunity to do this. And I know the members of the committee know this, but it's important to make clear that natural gas is not a very good name for this fuel. It should be called fossil gas. It's a fossil fuel. Its combustion contributes to climate change. The combustion of fossil fuels drives 80% of climate emissions. The plan now is to increase natural gas use by 300% by 2030. So 3 times more than we're using it now, and 500% by 2040. This would increase emissions from the electricity sector from about 4 megatons to 12 megatons by 2030 and 16 by 2040. This is tripling carbon emissions by 2030, the year when Ontario has promised to cut emissions by 30%. So these things do not fit together. It's also important to note, as Jack already mentioned, much of the gas we use here in Ontario is fracked gas. And fracked gas is much, much more polluting than other gas because a lot of the gas is released into the atmosphere during the fracking process. These are called fugitive emissions. It's methane itself leaking into the atmosphere. And these fugitive emissions are about 80% more potent than carbon dioxide as a climate warming gas in the short term over the 20 years. But it's the short term that matters right now. We're running out of time to keep warming to 1.5 degrees. We're at about 1 degree of warming right now, and it's not an exaggeration to say that the world is on fire. So we can't afford to go backwards on climate change, and that's why these gas plants have to be phased out, not ramped up. Clean energy, clean electricity is a core strategy in the fight against climate change, and it's entirely possible to meet Ontario's demand for power without relying on fossil fuels. Ottawa, as it's been noted before, would not be alone in calling for these plants to be phased out. 31 municipalities representing more than 50% of Ontario's population have passed resolutions asking for the provincial government to phase out the use of gas for electricity. This is not just here in Ontario, not just here in Canada. President Biden in the US is calling for 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035. We have new commitments out of the federal government that's now going to be returned to Ottawa also to move to a full clean electricity system. This is totally possible for Ontario. We strongly urge the city of Ottawa to support this resolution, to support this motion, to push for clean power, to push the province in the direction that we have to go. Thanks so much for listening to me this morning. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any questions from members of the committee? I don't see any, so thank you again for being here today. We move now to Dr. Sarah Sloan with MD Moms for Healthy Recovery.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning. So as you may recall, I'm a family physician in Ottawa. My name is Dr. Sarah Sloan. and I'm a member of the national group MD Moms for Healthy Recovery. And we are a group of mothers who are also physicians who are dedicated to advocating for a healthy and sustainable future. So I'm here to support Councillor Menard's motion to phase out gas power plants across the province while investing in clean and renewable energy sources, including hydro, solar, and wind. The World Health Organization has identified climate change as the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. Recently, the UN has declared a code red for humanity and has called for emergency level action from all levels of government around the world. In an unprecedented gesture, over 200 health journals have united in calling on world leaders to address the catastrophic harm to health from climate change and have demanded emergency action to limit temperatures, protect nature, and preserve biodiversity. Our bodies cannot withstand the levels of heat we are tracking towards. And we saw this with the deaths of over 600 individuals in BC as a result of the heat dome this summer. A destabilized climate threatens our food systems and displaces populations away from healthcare through flooding, wildfires, and drought, amongst other climate catastrophes. Infectious diseases thrive and pandemics become increasingly common. This summer's heat dome that killed hundreds, the wildfires, and the burning of Lytton must not be forgotten. Nature Journal has just published a study stating that fossil fuel extraction in Canada must be completely phased out in the next 10 years if we are to meet our 1.5 degree targets. It goes on to say that 84% of Canada's proven reserves must be left in the ground if we are to attain 1.5 degrees. And we need to recognize that every fraction of a degree above this target threatens millions of lives. The data is clear that to save lives and provide a healthy and viable future, we must immediately discontinue investment in and extraction of fossil fuels. And it is exactly for this reason that I and MD Mums fully support Councillor Menard's motion to phase out gas power plants across Ontario while investing in sustainable energy sources. The great news is that this decision will immediately benefit the health of Ontarians with cleaner air and will reduce our healthcare costs and future spending on climate mitigation. Money spent today reduces the money spent backtracking on missed opportunities. It also reduces the risk of stranded assets that have been invested that will no longer be viable. Currently, 1 in 5 premature deaths worldwide are related to the burning of fossil fuels. That's 20% of all deaths worldwide. And over 15,000 Canadians die every year from air pollution related to burning of fossil fuels. That's here at home, 15,000 Canadians every year. And the number is thought to actually be much higher. Every level of government has a role to play in creating a healthy future. So Ottawa has declared a climate emergency, and it is time to make investments and decisions that reflect the level of urgency and risk to each of us, our children, and future generations. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and I'd welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sloan. I don't see any hands up. So again, thank you for being here today. Appreciate, I know you've been here before, so appreciate you taking that time.
Thank you.
And we do have a last speaker who signed up just this morning. I don't have him on my list, but it's Al Scott with Canadians for Nuclear Energy.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for allowing me to speak at the last minute. I just had some time and I would love to talk to you guys about this motion. If you don't know, Canadians for Nuclear Energy is a grassroots environmental organization that recognizes the value of zero carbon emission, abundant green energy from Canada's CANDU reactor fleet. And we applaud Ottawa City Council's pro-environment stance on eliminating fossil gas electricity. I agree with all of the other speakers that getting rid of gas is an important step on the route to net zero. We're fully aligned with the goal to eliminate fossil fuels and replace them with low carbon electricity sources. Right now, clean zero carbon nuclear energy currently supplies 60% of Ontario's electricity and also important medical isotopes that save lives, while providing our economy in Canada with over 60,000 highly skilled jobs. Nuclear power allowed us to shut down our dirty coal generating plants a decade ago. They provided 90% of the electricity to do that. The International Panel on Climate Change roadmaps to net zero show that society needs to double or more likely triple its total electrical capacity to achieve 80% decarbonization in the coming decades. This will allow us to support the transition to electric vehicles and electric heat, for example. And as an earlier speaker said, we need to clean the grid to do this. We need to double or triple the electrical grid and clean it. How best can we manage this? What are the options? Well, asking Ontario to rely on Quebec Hydro when they will also need to double their domestic clean electrical supply, while well-intentioned, I think is a risky path away from energy sovereignty for Ontario, and especially when we know that Ontario exports electricity to Quebec during the winter when hydro is not really that as available. We will need domestic generation to fill in these holes. Quebec Hydro just signed a 5 gigawatt contract with New York State to export their additional hydro reserves to New York. So there's not going to be a lot left for Ontario, and it's not a good idea to depend on someone else to supply our domestic needs, I think. Unfortunately, wind power has been an unmitigated disaster for Ontario ratepayers. The Auditor General in 2015 noted that windmills built under the Green Energy Act cost us $37 billion above market rates over 8 years, and Ontarians were on the hook for an additional $133 billion of losses until 2032. One of the reasons wind is not a great solution for Ontario is it doesn't produce much energy in the summer when we need it the most. It basically produces mostly out of phase with demand, and so we are forced to sell it at cents on the dollar to the US because we don't need it at that point. We have stable resources like hydro and nuclear. In Ontario, solar panels have a capacity factor of about 13% relative to their rated output due to the northerly latitude when averaged over weather and time. And because of their variability, they aren't useful for eliminating natural gas from our power mix. In fact, many fossil gas companies are strong supporters of solar and wind. The Enbridge website states that renewable electricity requires natural gas backup when the wind and sunlight aren't available. Building more variable resources does not, unfortunately, decarbonize the need for natural gas. We need a stable, dispatchable energy source. What are the options left? Conservation will be of limited help as we're already needing to double or triple our electrical supply. This leaves clean nuclear power as the only viable solution to displace natural gas for Ontario in the coming decades.
1 minute.
Unfortunately, our fossil gas use is set to increase in 2024 when the Pickering nuclear station is scheduled to shut down. Pickering supplies 1/4 of Ontario's clean energy and electricity, 25%, roughly twice the full output of all of our windmills is supplied by Pickering. When it shuts down, we're going to fill that in with natural gas. Ontario Power Generation has bought several natural gas plants to replace the Pickering production. Why? Because it's cheap. 90% of the fossil gas is not going to be taxed under Ontario's plan for carbon taxation. Ontario does not tax the natural gas electricity suppliers. So our recommendations are ask Ontario to tax fully natural gas as a fossil fuel supplier and ask Ontario to refurbish Pickering, because we can't afford to lose that sort of capacity, that baseload capacity, which is dispatchable, which fills in the holes when the variable renewable sources, which I do support, but when they aren't working, natural gas is going to fill that hole if nuclear isn't there. So in closing, I just like you to consider the fact that there are other options that need to be put in place, and Pickering needs to be saved and the gas needs to be taxed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a question here from Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Scott. I did get your email and I did go back and I did a little bit of reading, so thank you. 2 questions. Is Pickering being decommissioned because it's completely come to the end of its life cycle? And what is the future of nuclear power in Ontario? Where is this on the provincial plan?
Okay, for your first part, Pickering is aging. It's our oldest nuclear resource. And based on the lifetime plan for CANDUs, it's at its half-time refurbishment. Right now, Bruce and Darlington are being refurbished, We have the skill sets. They're on budget and on time. The same thing could be done for Pickering. A plan was put forward to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission in 2010, but Ontario stopped following it. The refurbishment was approved by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, which would extend Pickering for another 30 or 40 years. The cost of that is estimated right now at about $8 to $9 billion to refurbish that, which is twice our wind fleet right now, for 30 or 40 years. That's the option. Or we could pay the same amount to decommission it. Those are the options on the table. We can decommission it for $8 to $9 billion, or we can have it offset 25% of our clean energy for 30 to 40 years. Ontario Power Generation wants to shut it down because right now gas is cheaper. They want to burn gas. It's not being taxed, and it's much cheaper for them to pay $2 or $3 billion to buy these gas plants and operate them. The other question about Ontario's plan right now, as I said, Bruce and Darlington are being refurbished. So they're having their midlife refurbishments. And Ontario has talked about small modular reactors as a potential future technology. Right now, that technology is 10 years out at least, and has lots of technical uncertainties in it. We know that the CANDU reactors work. We know that the Bruce upgrades are working. They've been done on budget. We know that the Darlington refurbishments are on budget and doing well. And we know that this is what we use to decarbonize our coal. We can use this again to decarbonize our gas. In fact, Darlington was meant to be twice the size it is. We could expand Darlington. We should be expanding Darlington because this is clean, stable baseload that we need to decarbonize our entire economy. When we double, I cannot see us doubling or tripling our full electricity just using wind power or even wind power and solar. And right now, they're less than 10% of our overall clean electricity.
Your insights have been very appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. I don't see any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Right. So that's it for our delegations on the matter. We do have, again, there was correspondence provided. It's available to members of committee and council. Questions. I mean, we could ask questions for staff. Maybe actually it wouldn't hurt to get a staff comment on this. I know Andrea's here. Mike Fletcher is here. So it wouldn't hurt to get just a staff comment. Where does this fit in to our overall, climate change master plan and our energy evolution?
Thank you, Chair. As many of the delegations said today, this is in line with energy evolution. Some of the key numbers that were reflected today are that about 8% of our target to reach 100% reductions is dependent on this kind of phase out and the in our provincial electricity grid. And the friendly amendment that we offered supports some of the other things we heard today about the importance of distributed energy resources, or DERs. So Mike Fletcher here as well to respond to any questions. Mike leads our electricity strategy, and happy to answer other technical or general questions if helpful.
Thanks. I will ask one just right now, because I know, you've seen, obviously you've been in touch with myself and Councillor DeRuse and Councillor Kitts and Councillor Chantieri. We have correspondence here today on the wind concerns. I think it's important to note that the motion itself is not strictly saying go out there and fill up Ottawa's landscape with wind. Doesn't say that at all. But I get that there's a fear. There was a fear a number of years ago of a proposal for probably 6 of the tallest wind turbines in the entire province to be located in North Gore. We heard from residents on that. I heard from residents on that from before I was elected and until after I was elected, when the company finally went out of business and the proposal died. But the fears are still there. The concerns are still there. There's a belief that the city is actually encouraging this, that we're actually going to go out there and apply for wind and do it ourselves. We aren't. That's never been a plan for the city. That's not the plan in energy evolution, nor is it in the climate change master plan. But Andrea, maybe not just now, because we're in a formal setting like this. It might be just an easy opportunity to address that, respond to that piece, just on the wind piece.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what you said. Energy Evolution does call for the production of wind at a regional scale, and it is part of how we will achieve our Energy Evolution targets. That said, we are not promoting or planning to currently build any wind turbines. The City of Ottawa is not planning to do that. We have heard those concerns, and we've been working with Ottawa Wind Concerns to respond to the questions that they've had. They've provided some very thoughtful and detailed comments, and those come into play, particularly when we look at our official plan and some of the land use policies which are being considered under the official plan. And those will carry forward, and the concerns that they have voiced can be considered in more detail as we get into the implementation of the official plan. Things like zoning to address concerns related to noise, setbacks, and all things associated with those.
Thanks for that. I mean, it's, one of the things I've been trying to get across is that it's not, the reality is that wind is a permitted use in Ontario. Currently, that they're not, there is no opportunity to apply for an industrial wind project, but we expect that'll likely change. But there is an opportunity here for Ottawa to actually prepare for that. I know in the past, Council had approved a motion that I brought forward asking the province to provide some sort of a role for municipalities to play in this. I know there's over 100 municipalities in Ontario that have, declared themselves an unwilling host to this. And you heard from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance that says they support that. They support that municipalities should have a say. And I think this council supports that municipalities should have a say. But we also need to make sure that we are preserving agricultural land. I know that these do locate themselves on a private agricultural land. Some will say that's not a loss. There is infrastructure that comes with this that does pull away from private agricultural land when they are located there. So there's a lot to play here. There's a lot to look at from a zoning perspective, from how the city can plan our communities and our growth and how that fits in with renewable energy. And I think it's important that we look at that in the official plan and eventually in the zoning implementation. And I hope the province considers some of this stuff, not just for Ottawa, but for municipalities across Ontario. We hear about municipalities that have passed motions on this. St. Catharines has no rural land. St. Catharines there's a reason why St. Catharines has zero urban growth. They have nowhere to grow. They can only go up. They can only intensify. So some municipalities don't have the same impacts from some of these rural renewable energy sources, and we have to try to balance that. We have a very, very large city. We have all generally worked quite well together. People ask often, how can you get anywhere with only 4 rural councillors? We've never had a vote on this council. 11 years I've been here. We've never had a single vote that went 20-4, urban versus rural. It's never happened. So we have a collaborative council here. We have a city with distinct urban, suburban, and rural. And I think we've been able to collaborate well together on things up until to date. And I hope that continues forward. And when there's concerns from rural Ottawa on things like this, we know that there's some benefits, but we need to be able to focus that and make sure that our plans and our policies are aligned and address that. But if there's communities that are willing to host these things, we also need to recognize that too. So that's end of my diatribe. So thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Mike, for being here. For any questions from members of council. George, I did see your hand up. I'm not sure if my rant covered what you were gonna.
Yeah, it did cover it, Scott. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I thank you, Andrea, for the answers. I really appreciate it. That was my question, and you hit the nail on the head.
All right. Any questions for either staff, or even if you want to grill Councilor Menard because it's his motion, I will provide that opportunity. I will give a lot of leeway too. If you want to yell at him, no, I'm just joking. Councilor Brockington, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. No, I will not be grilling Councillor Menard. I do support the sentiments of his motion and thank him for moving it. And I do appreciate the delegations and some of the Q&A we've had. I'm really not, I need to have a better understanding of the second motion that's just been moved today. I'm wondering if we could get that posted on the screen and just walk through them so I completely understand what is being proposed. So are city staff able to walk us through each A, B, and C and just in layman's language talk to us about what this means?
Mike, can you walk folks through, please?
Yeah, sure thing. So, yeah, there were three main aspects that we thought would encourage distributed energy resources, and distributed energy resources would, practically speaking, probably be predominantly solar and energy storage. And energy evolution foresaw that, the model foresaw that quite a bit of the solar would be things that would be distributed. So rooftop solar and small scale solar, and also storage that's on the distribution system. So the three items, currently there's a prohibition against third-party ownership of net metering. The city has taken advantage of third-party ownership of the past in the form of roof rental. So if you think of some of our large facilities like rec facilities, some of them have solar on them as roof rentals, and those have been easy to do, a good source of local generation, and we would like that to return. Virtual net metering, of course, is where somebody can make some power in one part of the city and wheel it to somebody else who's willing to buy it. So somebody makes some renewable power and somebody else purchases it. This was coming along and has stopped, and would certainly encourage distributed energy resource development in Ottawa. Item B, allow DERs to participate in capacity auctions. So capacity auctions are auctions that make sure that there is enough power for the peaks. So all the concerns we have about, peak days, capacity auctions really zero in on them. And to some extent, local resources can contribute, especially battery storage can contribute to capacity. So we want to make sure they can. And even variable resources can be relied upon at certain times. Even a cloudy day, a solar panel will make some power. So it can be relied upon to some extent to handle the peaks, so to handle capacity, and they should be credited for that. So in the States, for example, there's system operators that give credit to solar generation for the capacity contribution they are able to do. And the last one is about bulk energy resources. So just total energy, electrical energy we need over the year. As Pickering is going out, it really does look like the province will move forward with trying to procure just bulk quantities of energy. And we're saying that DERs, distributed energy resources, should be contributing to that. And the last one is kind of more at the regulatory end. So, right now we're the owner of Hydro Ottawa. Every year there's a scorecard on Hydro Ottawa performance, put how well we're dealing with getting DERs in our neck of the woods on that utility scorecard, and just look at some of the practices around the rate structure. So extra charges for net metering, for instance, or the rate that, say, net metering is compensated, and consider being a little nicer to attempts to make some local generation, through distributed resources. So these things would really help with market penetration.
Is it fair to say that this motion facilitates competition in the marketplace and would have a positive impact on consumers?
I would have to say so. There's nothing implicit or explicit about a subsidy here. So when we're talking about DERs currently in this context, it's that somebody will see an economic benefit from making an investment.
Okay, I'm glad you provided that explanation. I wasn't 100% clear what this motion was going to do, not clear what the current landscape looks like. And if the net result is better, then I'm inclined to support that. But again, I appreciated your 2 cents. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Menard, did you want to wrap up on your item?
I don't think it's necessary, Chair. Thanks.
No worries. So I won't read the whole thing again. Obviously, I read the 3 recommendations at the beginning of the item in terms of what the actual report says before us. We just went through, Mike just aptly went through the add-on piece. So on that amended motion from Councilor Menard, is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you. And then on the item as a whole, as amended.
Carried.
Thank you. It's interesting with the items that we find ourselves here. It's usually stuff that we don't have a full control over. You know, we're going to go through this whole solid waste master plan piece, and there's a massive chunk of waste out there. There's multiple landfills that we have no control over, and the hydro piece is not too different. The energy evolution, the plan that we proposed, that we brought forward and approved, requires a lot of effort from other parties, other levels of government, and private entities as well, to meet our goals. And that's always going to be the challenge that we have, any municipality faces, is working with others and having people kind of be on the same page, pulling in the same direction. Easier said than done, certainly. So thank you for your indulgence today as we went through that, and the delegations. Appreciate the delegations coming here as well. So we move on. That is it for the substantive items on the agenda. In-camera items, there are none at all, ever. Information previously distributed. We have an update on the final regulations for provincial transition of the Blue Box program and hazardous and special products program to individual producer responsibility. Members of council are aware that we've staff have done. Andrew Gay Farley has done a phenomenal job keeping everyone updated on how these transitions are occurring at the province and what the impacts are to the city of Ottawa and to our residents with the IPR. And the main focus right now, of course, is the Blue Box program, as well as the hazardous and special products. I know that's of concern to many people and residents in the city as well. So we have that. And then moving on from that, notices of motion. Any notices of motion? No one's giving me anything. None. Inquiries? Councillor McKenny, did you have an inquiry?
Sorry, I did. I don't know if I was just looking for it actually as we were coming up to it, and I can't find it. I don't know if Christopher, it was sent to you.
Well,
just about a screen share.
Oh, there you go.
There it is. Okay, thank you for that. This is just around forestry management and just how we're how trees being cut down are brought to our attention. So just recently the forest management branch began issuing tree removal notifications to councillors and posting them on trees to indicate when, where, and why trees requiring a tree permit are being removed. The system does certainly help to track tree removals per ward, but I have not found it effective in detailing if or where replanting is occurring. The condition of permit section is typically not sufficient to understand if a tree will be replaced, when, where, and with what caliper. Monetary compensation and or tree replacement as per permit conditions is a typical condition of permit. However, with the tree removal notifications, offices do not receive the tree removal permit, so it's impossible to know what the conditions of the permit are. Therefore, we cannot be sure if a replacement tree is being provided or the owner has paid the compensation fee for not replacing the tree. Retaining and growing our urban canopy is vitally important. Greater clarity and transparency in the replanting process is needed. So the question is, or 3 questions are, can the location and anticipated date of replanting be provided through the tree removal notifications so councillors' offices and residents have greater certainty on replantings? How are plantings for tree removals tracked? And can this information be made more publicly accessible for councillors' offices and so the public can know if, when, and where a removed tree will be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other inquiries? Seeing none. Other business? None. What would other business be? I wonder what we should do. Someday we should figure out what other business could be, and we should have that other business. Just tack it on here. Adjournment. Does everyone want to adjourn?
Adjourned.
You all do?
Adjourned.
You all want to adjourn?
Thank you.
Sure. Should I do yeas and nays?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, our next meeting is Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. And there are no elections between now and then. But we might have one at some point. You guys, by-election coming up. I set a over-under at the start of this term for 2.5 on by-elections. And if things go, anyone who picked the over, making some money. Good term. Okay, we'll see y'all later.
Thank you.